À chacun.
Welcome, everyone. I will now welcome you to meeting number 38 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on the Status of Women. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members are attending in person and remotely using Zoom. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For those on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. Thank you all for your collaboration. Pursuant to Standing Order 81-4, the committee is commencing consideration of the main estimates 2026-27. Credit 1 and 5, or rather votes 1 and 5, under Department for Women and Gender Equality, referred to the committee Thursday, February 26, 2026. The committee will vote on these at the end of today's meeting.
Je voudrais maintenant, si vous me le permettez, bien sûr, souhaiter...
I would now like to welcome our witnesses. First, Madam Minister, the Honorable Richie Valdez, MP and Minister of Women and Gender Equality and Small Businesses and Tourism, Frances McRae, Deputy Minister, and Madam Gail Mitchell, ADM. She'll be with us during the second hour. And from the Department of Industry, Mr. Etienne Rene Massy, ADM, Small Business, Tourism, and Marketplace Services. Welcome. The Minister will be with us for the first hour. The Deputy Minister and the ADMs will be with us for the 2 hours. As you know, you have up to 5 minutes for your opening remarks. And afterwards, there will be a question and answer period. Over to you.
Bonjour, Madam Chair and honorable members of the committee. Merci de m'avoir invité à m'adresser à vous.
Thank you for the invitation to be here today.
Share my profound devastation and heartbreak for the woman who lost her life in Gatineau this week, making Quebec's 10th femicide this year. Ces féminicides sont bouleversants et rappellent la...
These femicides are painful and remind us of the gravity of this crisis.
This committee on the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. Just over a year ago, I had the honor of being appointed Women and Gender Equality, and in this past year, I've had the opportunity to meet with women, girls, and community leaders and frontline workers across this country. The experiences people have shared with me over the past year, their strength and their trust, have shaped my work and strengthened my voice in this role. A year into this mandate, my purpose remains clear: to help build a Canada where safety, dignity, and opportunity are real for every woman, girl, and gender diverse person, no matter what their circumstance. I trust this commitment is shared by everyone at this committee. And I really want to thank the members of this committee from all sides of the House for the work you have done to advance gender equality and to elevate the voices of advocates, survivors, and communities across this country. Votre travail a contribué.
Your work has helped ensure that these voices are reflected in the conversations we have and the policies we shape.
Victims and survivors of coercive control, to your report on the red dress alert for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, to your most recent efforts to move forward with Bill C-225, Bailey's Law, which will enhance legal protections for victims of gender-based violence. This committee has shown what is possible when collaboration comes before partisanship and when public service is guided by purpose. Nous avons un objectif commun.
We have a common goal to build a Canada where everyone can live free from violence and free from fear.
That's why we owe it to every woman, girl, and 2S LGBTQI+ community member in this country. And I'm here today to speak on Women and Gender Equality Canada's 2026-2027 main estimates and the values behind that work. The main estimates outline how our government will continue advancing safety, equality, and opportunity. They sustain programs that prevent gender-based violence, support survivors, and strengthen the systems people heavily rely on. Through these investments, WAGE can maintain community partnerships, respond to emerging priorities, and deepen collaboration across governments and sectors. Progress toward gender equality is advancing, but it's certainly not complete. The impacts of gender-based violence and systemic inequality remain uneven, falling hardest on those who have been historically underserved and overlooked. These realities demand action that is consistent, coordinated, and backed by resources that last. For 2026-2027, Women and Gender Equality Canada will receive $414.6 million, including $345.6 million in grants and contributions. The resources they contain give life to the National Action Plan to End Gender-Based Violence, allowing federal, provincial, and territorial and community partners to move forward with vision and action. It also includes funding from our most recent budget, which provides ongoing and stable funding to the sector who have asked for it. In parallel, through Bill C-16, the Protecting Victims Act, we are advancing reforms to the criminal code that address feminicide and coercive control, helping ensure the justice system can intervene earlier and respond more effectively. These approaches go hand in hand through steady investment, working alongside legislative progress and strong national leadership. At the heart of this work are local organizations on the front lines. They create safe spaces and offer hope, whether supporting youth at risk of sexual exploitation, providing culturally safe spaces, or strengthening supports for the 2S LGBTQI+ communities. These organizations turn policy into protection and funding into real support.
For those seeking safety, these investments are not abstract. They are the life-changing supports and services people rely on when they need them the most.
Through these estimates ensures organizations can continue that work with confidence because safety is foundational. People cannot participate fully in their communities, workplaces, or public life if they are not safe, and they cannot thrive without equal access to the tools and opportunities that allow them to succeed. Looking ahead, the investments reflected in our budgets and the main estimates will continue that work. They will allow the department to support critical programs, provide meaningful support, and deliver meaningful change.
Merci, Madame la Ministre. Ça va conclure ainsi.
Thank you. That's the end of our time. And now we can start with questions. Hello, Madam Roberts. Over to you. Hello, Madam Chair. Over to you.
Thank you very much, the Minister. I have a few questions for you, and I know I have limited time, so I'll try and be quick. Minister, in response to my letter outlining my concerns around human trafficking in this country and asking for you to provide an update on its status in Canada, you outlined programs and funding under the national strategy, but failed to provide an update on the implementation of the 22 recommendations from the February 2024 committee report, Act Now, Preventing Human Trafficking of Women, Girls, and Gender Diverse People in Canada. Can you tell this committee how many of these recommendations have been fully implemented to date, and what is the timeline that you expect for their full implementation?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for that question. I just want to first acknowledge that human trafficking exploits the most vulnerable in our communities. I thank the member for sending that letter. We have provided a response to that letter. And with regards to the Minister of Public Safety, he leads Canada's national strategy to combat human trafficking, which has funded an investment of $57.22 million over 5 years, with $10.28 million ongoing. And from this, Women and Gender Equality received $10 million to create the Human Trafficking Initiative. This initiative funds organizations that will prevent human trafficking and supports victims and survivors, particularly those who are
Sorry, Madam. Sorry, Minister, I only have a few minutes. My question is, can you confirm whether all 22 recommendations from the Status of Women Committee were implemented? If not, which recommendations will not be included? If you could just give me a number.
Madam Chair, again, through the work through this national plan, and in addition to the National Action Plan to End Gender-Based Violence, our government is doing everything we possibly can to ensure that we are addressing human trafficking across the country. Again, I've already responded to the member with a response just the other day. But what I can share is a story, because both of us are in the province of Ontario, with Victim Services of Durham Region. They seek to improve how hospitals identify and respond to human trafficking. I do want to share the good news. They've worked and trained over 300 healthcare professionals. They have introduced trauma-informed tools and embedded victim advocate directly into hospital
Excuse
settings.
me for
Madam Chair, this is
interrupting,
helping.
Minister. Excuse me, Minister. Okay, let's go on to the next question because I wanted to know the number out of 22, but I'm obviously not going to get that response. So let's go on to the next question. While the government is failing to stop these transactions, the lives of children, women, and girls are being destroyed. Survivors and frontline organizations have told this committee they need action, not just announcement. IRCC detected human trafficking cases in 2019 to 2020. 19 large-scale investigations were conducted, and 10 were conducted in 2020 to 2021, and 2022 to 2023. Global Coalition to Fight Financial Crime has reported proceeds of up to $498 billion. If incidents and court cases are increasing, how does this government evaluate whether the strategy is actually working?
Thank you for that question, Madam Chair. Again, our government is doing everything we can through the Human Trafficking Initiative. We're working very closely with the Minister of Public Safety. Again, through his national strategy to combat human trafficking, we are ensuring that we're doing everything I can through our investments to provide supports to organizations on the ground who are doing the work to prevent human trafficking and to further assist. Now, with regards to the question, again, I provided the letter, but I'm happy to share that we're working directly with the Canada Border Service agencies, the Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Centre of Canada. We're working with Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, the Public Services and Procurement Canada to ensure we are, again, supporting and doing everything we can to prevent human trafficking in this country.
That's a lot of money. We're talking about $500 billion US billion dollars. I don't see any evidence of reducing that. Let's go on to the next question. I recently completed an undercover operation with York Region Police, and they are concerned with the punishment for these criminals, as they do not reflect the serious nature of the issue of human trafficking. Given the low rates of guilty findings and ongoing concerns from the law enforcement, the current consequences are not acting as a sufficient deterrent, does the government believe that the existing sentencing framework for human trafficking offenses are adequate? Yes or no?
Thank you, Madam Chair. What I can share with this committee is that a third of our legislation is focused on making sure that we're keeping Canadians safe, whether that's our bail reform, whether that's the fact that we're hiring 1,000 CBSA officers, 1,000 RCMP officers, Madam Chair. We're going to make sure that we're going to keep Canadians safe and that we're going to do it in response, again, through our national strategy to combat human trafficking in this country.
So what would you tell the police officers that are on the front line that continuously hear the stories of these human traffickers that are afraid to come forward because we're not keeping them in jail, we're letting them out?
2 points I'll say, Madam Chair. First, I want to thank our law enforcement agencies, particularly the Toronto and Peel Police, who are doing the good work on the ground. Again, we're going to give the tools and the resources to our law enforcement agencies, and specifically through the legislation we've put forward, bail reform, to make sure that violent repeat offenders do not.
Ce sera le mot de la fin, Madame la Ministre, pour cette question avec Madame.
Unfortunately, our time is drawing to a close. Madame Menard, over to you. Hello, Chair. I feel a bit far. Madam Minister, welcome. And Madam McRae-McMassey, great to see you again. During your opening remarks, you talk about how efficient our committee is. You are correct. As our new chair likes to say, we're a bit hyperactive and we are proud. On a much more serious note, yesterday we were stupefied to learn of the 10th femicide in Quebec. She died violently. This young woman, Shannon Jean Ike, 30, she was identified today. Recently, we heard from the Minister of Justice, the Honourable Sean Fraser, and he explained the government's strategy to fight against femicide, the most violent and fatal form of GBV. He told us about the 3 pillars of the strategy. If we concentrate exclusively on the prong under your department, please speak to that, and please be specific in your opening remarks. You talked about programs. Please go over the budgets allotted to this.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, for that question. Again, as I addressed in my opening earlier, it's really important to address the fact that today we heard heartbreaking news. This is completely unacceptable. Gender-based violence has no place in our country. I'm thinking about the women, the families, the loved ones who are deeply impacted, and my heart goes out to all of them. Our response in terms of our federal government is one that is both urgent and it's practical. And if we're referring to Quebec specifically, our agreement with Quebec has provided $97.3 million to support organizations on the ground. They're helping survivors, they're strengthening frontline services, and working to make sure that we're doing everything we can to prevent violence before it happens. And through our National Action Plan to End Gender-Based Violence, we're making sure that provinces and territories are allocating at least a minimum of 25% of all funding that goes towards the prevention. And as this committee knows, you've had the minister here already to speak about Bill C-16. Really critically important, this is what we've heard from frontline organizations to make sure that we're making femicide a first-degree offense. And on this piece around criminalizing control, this is vitally important because one of the precursors to violence in this country is coercive control. And coercive control can come in many forms. By putting forward Bill C-16, what women organizations have asked for is to make sure that our law enforcement has the tools, mechanisms to be able to act, to make sure that we're providing interventions of coercive control. When we can intervene in any respect, and working through it with financial institutions as well on the financial side, when we act, we are able to stop these acts of violence and prevent gender-based violence in our country. And I think this piece around Bill C-16 is incredibly important. And again, above and beyond that, it's really making sure that we're strengthening our criminal system.
Merci, Madame la Ministre. Vous parlez de contrôle coercitif.
Thank you, Chair. You talked about coercive control. Last November, this very committee tabled our report with recommendations regarding criminalizing coercive control. Are you telling us that our committee, that your department influenced, collaborated on C-16?
Merci, Madam Chair, for that.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And as I said in my opening, I really believe that the work on this committee and all the different reports that you've provided have really fed into that. And because the Minister of Justice has had an opportunity to appear at this committee on multiple occasions, he's been able to take that feedback back and also ensure that Bill C-16, again, is strengthened and solidified. And I really want to, again, thank the committee for that work. And finally, Madam Chair, I already mentioned the importance of making sure that we're focused on prevention, on coercive control, and we're also seeing a rise in artificial intelligence and deep fakes across the country. Bill C-16 also works to address that. And then the fourth piece with Bill C-16 is that we've heard from women the challenges that they have when they come into contact with the justice system. We know that they often get re-traumatized from their experience, and Bill C-16 ensures that it helps protect victims and survivors, but also it addresses some of the court delays, which are some of the issues that we've already heard from advocates time and time again.
Étant à distance, Madame la Présidente, je vous vois pas.
Do I have any time left, Madam Chair? Oh, I was just about to tell you that you have 1 minute left. Thank you. That's very kind of you. If you do not have the time to respond, maybe you can respond to one of my colleagues. At the moment, we are wrapping up the report on the rise of anti-feminist ideology. Through our discussion, some colleagues seem to think that we want to antagonize men, that we want men and women to fight. Can you speak to the prevention and the inclusion of young men, boys in the fight against gendered violence? The idea isn't to blame anyone, but to ensure that prevention also reaches young men and boys.
Merci, Madam Chair. As a mother of a son, I can say that it's really important that we ensure that all of our solutions are grounded in the fact that we need to make sure to take care of our men and boys. Oh.
Merci beaucoup. Vous aurez l'occasion peut-être.
Thank you very much. Now, Madame Larouche. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Minister, for being with us today. But once again, we are shocked. We are shocked to learn of the femicide that took place. The first femicide this year, one of the first ones, was Véronique Champagne. This happened in Shefford. There was one evening where I was able to participate in an event to commemorate that, and now we're at our 10th femicide. All my condolences to Shannon Jean Ike's family. It's so hard to understand why all this violence takes place. Last November, after we tabled the report where we discussed coercive control, and that came out of a report in Quebec. We said coercive control needed to be in the criminal code, and it was up to the federal government to act. In the beginning of the year, when there was the femicide of Véronique Champagne, one of her loved ones said that femicides are the crimes that are the easiest to avoid. Unfortunately, we haven't managed to avoid them yet. Madam Minister, first question. Could we launch a multi-year campaign to end femicide? However, temporary funding that defense organizations receive from WAGE is insufficient as it stands. At the same time, regressive movements, and we can see it with the rise of Meninism, is walking back human rights. Violence against women is leading to more and more victims, and femicides are on the rise in Quebec and Canada, and that's against the backdrop of economic insecurity, catalyzed by geopolitical uncertainty, the lack of operational funding for defense groups, and all of that imperils women's rights. Are you committed to leveling the playing field and offering stable funding to these organizations?
Pour la question, I thank my honourable colleague, Madam Chair, for that question. We've had many conversations with regards to ending gender-based violence in this country. What I can share with this committee, I alluded to it the last time I was here, was our government's commitment to making sure that through women and gender equality that we're investing to make sure that we're going to do everything we can to end gender-based violence. In the last budget in November, you would have seen a commitment of $660.5 million. This is absolutely essential. You need funding. Organizations have asked for this. Now, when we talk about gender-based violence, $223.4 million over 5 years, significant investment. And the piece that's really critical, it's the first time in history, $44.7 million ongoing. This is tremendously important. And I do want to share, since the member is from Quebec, I really appreciate that she attended that occasion to be able to commemorate the person who we have lost. Through Regroupement de Maisons pour Femmes Victimes de Violences Conjugales,
the group of women's shelters, Quebec,
socio-judicial system's ability to recognize, document, and respond to coercive control for intimate partner violence. And the tools that they've delivered have helped 6,200 professionals, Madam Chair, which is absolutely essential to make sure that frontline organizations can have the support and do everything they can to end gender-based violence in this country.
La réalité, Madame la Ministre, c'est qu'il y a plusieurs...
The reality is that there are many responsibilities linked to violence against women, and the Quebec National Assembly made some really great headway to that effect. There was the Gabi Renault law, for instance. Here's the issue. the Minister of Justice, shelters, police officers, and those who help victims. It's all on a provincial level. And so Quebec says they don't have enough resources to deal with the crisis. Will there be new measures in the criminal code is all well and good, but there's a financial, there's something that's not balanced financially. Are you going to do anything? I'm afraid that the new measures in the criminal code then the provinces in Quebec are just holding a hot potato.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to share again, I do appreciate I'm going to go back to what the idea that the member opposite brought up with regards to the campaign on femicides. I think that's a great idea. If this, committee does agree that that's what we want to do in this country, I think that you can certainly put that forward. With regards to the Quebec Assembly, I'm happy to work alongside Minister Biron. I congratulate her for taking on the portfolio again. I recently met with her right before the election, and one of the supports that we're ensuring that at federal level we're providing funding for is the crisis lines. These are vital supports that Quebecers need,
Merci,
women
Madame la
need.
Ministre. C'est très frustrant.
Thank you, Madam Minister. I have to keep the time. What can I say? Madam Cody, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for coming today. Would you agree that homelessness among older adults or seniors have increased?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for that question. What I can say that is what our government is doing is making sure that we recognize vulnerable
It was a
Canadians.
simple question for yes or no. I was wondering, federal homelessness reporting shows that unsheltered homelessness has increased 107%. Is that something that's acceptable to you, Minister? 107%?
Madam Chair, what the member opposite would have seen in our spring economic update is that our commitment to making sure that we're providing.
Minister, that's not an answer. I asked you if that's acceptable to you. 107% of homelessness, of an increase.
Madam Chair, we recognize that there is an increase in challenges that
I'd
seniors
like to interrupt,
are facing.
Minister. Here are some stats in your own home area. That shelter use has increased 44% from 2023 to 2024. Shelters in your area are operating at 383% over capacity. Waitlist in Peel has more than doubled. Mississauga has publicly acknowledged rising homelessness as part of a growing affordability and housing crisis. According to your government data, 1 out of 5 people using shelters are over 50. Older adults have the highest rate of chronic homelessness in Canada, the fastest growing group. 59% of Canadians now say they'll never retire. Do these stats shock you, Minister?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, what I was talking about earlier is that what our government is doing is committed to building more homes quicker. And specifically within our budget, she would have seen $1 billion.
Minister, while you're reading
funding.
pre-written and approved responses, Canadian women and seniors want and need answers to where they can live safely. Do you have an answer for them?
Madam Chair, if the member opposite provides me an opportunity, I'm happy to give that answer. But what I was saying was our investments in housing is we have a commitment to doubling the rate of housing, specifically helping making sure that those who are most vulnerable get the access, and around shelters, which is the core of her question, $1 billion to make sure that transitional and shelter
Minister,
homes are qualified
that's
for
not
that
answering
funding
my questions.
across the country.
Like, people are being forced out of home ownership. There's not enough homes for them, and building houses 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years aren't helping people with home ownership now, and many are becoming homeless. I have an 84-year-old woman in my city who can no longer afford the high cost of living and had to go to a shelter. What would you say to this woman?
I would like to share with that senior that our government is committed to making sure that we're supporting seniors, that we are providing millions
What
of
are
seniors
her options now, Minister?
I'm happy to share those options, Madam Chair. Our government, through our old age security, the guaranteed income supplement, the Canada Pension Plan, and through one of my favorite programs, the New Horizons Seniors Program, our government is there and committed to supporting seniors.
Minister,
and in particular,
is a shelter...
Point of order.
Madame Nathan.
Madam Chair, I would really like to hear the minister actually finish answering one of the questions. I would really like to hear her answer. Thank you.
She's not answering.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What I was saying was our government has raised old age security by 10% for seniors 75 years or older. If it wasn't for the Conservative Party of Canada, seniors would have to wait until the age of 67 to retire. Madam Chair, this is these supports that we're providing, in addition to dental care across the
Minister,
country, is prioritizing
I'm talking about a
seniors.
shelter as a safe place. Is a shelter a safe place for an 84-year-old woman today to live in, if she can even get into a shelter?
Madame la Ministre.
Madam Chair, again, I've already answered that question. $1 billion focused on housing across the country, transitional homes, affordable homes. Within that funding, shelters and transitional homes qualify for that funding, and we are working directly with provinces and territories to make sure that vital housing that is needed across the country will be fulfilled.
Okay, Minister, it's not enough because things are not getting any better. Reports are telling us that seniors, the poor and disabled, I've got reports right here, and they're saying, why is Canada euthanizing the poor? Seniors are wanting MAID rather than losing their home and their dignity. The CEO of the Mississauga Food Bank, Megan Nichols, has publicly said she has clients who are asking her about how to apply for MAID because they can no longer live in poverty today. So what do you have to say to these people who fear homelessness more than death?
Madam Chair, seniors do deserve to live in dignity and be able to afford a cost of living, which is why our government is ensuring that through, again, our old
Minister,
age security.
no Canadian should feel pushed toward MAID because of poverty or housing insecurity. What are you actually doing now, today, to prevent that from happening?
20 secondes, Madame la Ministre.
3 seconds.
Oh, okay. Again, going back to what I said, we're providing financial supports. We're ensuring that we're building more homes faster, particularly to address the issues around homelessness and the issues that the
Minister,
member
Canadians
opposite
want
has
and need
raised.
answers today where they can live safely. Do you have an answer for them right now?
Madam Chair, I'm happy to provide a
Ça
list of
conclut cette
resources for seniors.
conversation. Merci beaucoup, Mesdames.
That concludes the conversation. Thank you very much. We have a shared time, if I understand, on the government side between Madame Gladieux and her colleague, and Madame Mayor.
With Ms. Wen. And thank you, Minister, for being here today. So you are right. This committee has done amazing work, and I just was on Justice Committee watching us finish the clause by clause on C-16. That was very rewarding. Now I see that we have plans to do major building and building houses across the country, and we're going to need people in the trades to do that, and we're really not tapping into enough women in the trades. So if you could talk a little bit about what you're doing to promote women in the trades.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for that question. Again, I appreciate the the members' statements with regards to supporting women and making sure that we have more women in trades. And as our government builds more homes, as our government builds national building projects, we want to make sure that women have equal opportunity. And through the spring economic update, we've made significant new investments to strengthen our skilled trades. We've recently are launching Team Canada Strong. This is a $6 billion national initiative. What we plan to do is make sure that young Canadians have the chance to apply. We're investing $2 billion to train young Canadians to make sure that they can get access to that. And our goal is to ensure that we hire 80,000 to 100,000 new red skilled trades workers, and that, of course, is going to be inclusive of women. I was just out in Windsor not too long ago making an announcement, and I met this incredible organization that empowers young women to make sure that they participate in the trades. And we recognize women face a lot of those barriers, and so we have organizations who are ready to do the good work to make sure that we're empowering young Canadians. And again, through our spring economic update, $2 billion will support paid, ready job placements that lead directly into registered apprenticeships that will help reduce one of the biggest barriers into apprenticeships. And for women, this absolutely matters so much. I was recently with my daughter, and I want to thank KGIS, the organization out in the GTA. They do great work in empowering young women and girls. And one of the exercises we got to do was virtually weld using artificial intelligence, which was really cool. It really creates the opportunity for young girls to see themselves in trades, to see themselves being able to use tools, be hands-on, and see that they can absolutely participate and help grow our economy.
Thank you. I'm going to pass it to Ms. Swinton.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Minister, for being here today. I'm going to try and keep this tight because I know we're short on time. Well, I know how critical our childcare is to our economy. I think of it as economy-enabling infrastructure, and this is a priority for our government and, of course, your department when we think about women's economic security. Could you tell us about how your department is working on supporting women through entrepreneurship, et cetera, and helping women enter and remain in the workforce? We have great childcare in this, in my riding in particular, great multi-service agencies delivering this work from St. Stephen's Community House to Wood Green Community Services. Great examples of how we can support women on that side, but I'd love to hear more.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for that question. Thanks to our government's commitment through the National Early Learning and Childcare Program, we have as low as $10 a day childcare. We've heard time and time again from women's organizations that this support is vitally needed because women who want to start a business, who want to pursue their career can now get access to that because of our affordable childcare. And in terms of savings, we're looking at $6,200 per year that an average family can save because of our National Early Learning and Childcare. This absolutely matters. It creates the environment where Canadians can participate fully. And with regards to the entrepreneurs that the member was asking about, through our women entrepreneurship strategy, we've already supported 500,000 women across the country start, scale, and grow their businesses. I've met many who continue to inspire me every day. And again, we're going to continue to do everything we can to make sure that women in this country, through Women and Gender Equality, through our women's program, and through leadership opportunities, can contribute and grow. And, I have a daughter. She's 11 years old, and it's just amazing to see all the opportunities she now has thanks to our government's commitments to gender equality.
That last 30 seconds, if you want to share a data point on women's economic security that you think is a proof that we are doing well in this space.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. The member was with me to make an important announcement not too long ago. We recently funded the Canadian Women's Foundation $15.5 million. Through their hard work, they are ensuring that this money goes out to the organizations on the ground that are doing all good work to end gender.
Thank you, Madam Minister. Madame Laroche, now you do have the floor. 2.5 minutes, is that right? Yes. Madam Minister, let's carry on here. One of my colleagues asked a question concerning the senior citizens, the elderly, and we look in particular at the situation of senior citizen women, and it's not very encouraging. The problem is that poverty affects everyone, and if you're 75 and poor, it's not very good. And if you have a situation of coercive control or family violence, there is some help for you. But women 75 and older are excluded from many programs. Have you and your government recognized the fact that this is an inequality that is particularly affecting women of 75 or older? They need to have financial support that is increased.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for that question. I was speaking with regards to senior women earlier and what our government is doing. Again, we've raised old age security by 10% for seniors 75 and older. But what we also recognize is that seniors are very vulnerable to financial fraud and abuse. And our government believes this is completely unacceptable. The Minister of Finance recently launched an anti-fraud strategy to protect seniors, prevent scams before they happen, and go after those who seek to take advantage of them. We're also moving forward with financial institutions on establishing an economic abuse code of conduct so that institutions can better intervene when instances of scams and economic abuse occur. That certainly helps women who are over the age of 75. And one of the organizations I am proud of in terms of their work is the Canadian Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse. They've addressed gaps in gender-based violence responses for women aged 55 and older. And through those investments into this organization, they have developed trauma and violence-informed tools and guidance tailored to older survivors again, which the member was asking about. This includes a self-assessment tool for service providers, and it directly, again, helps those who are fleeing difficult situations. And what
Merci
I do
beaucoup,
appreciate
Madame la
about their
Ministre.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. I'm afraid that this is it. Ms. Goodridge, you have the floor.
Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Minister, for being here. I know you're a mom, so you understand very well how expensive it is to raise a child in today's space. Does the ever-rising cost of baby formula concern you at all?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for that question. Again, just to answer the member's question, we recognize the challenges that women and mothers are facing with regards to the cost of living in this country, and that's why we're doing everything we can to make sure we're tackling the cost of affordability.
Do you know how much it has gone up, just in the last 2 years, the cost of baby formula?
Madam Chair, thank you for that question. Our government is doing everything we can. It's
30%. 30% it's gone up just in the last 2 years. Do you know how much it's gone up in the last 8 years?
Madam Chair, what our government is doing is making sure that we're going to help ensure that we're making life more affordable for Canadians, and specifically for...
The answer is 84%. This is real numbers. This is real space. Families are struggling to make ends meet, and your government being focused on something at some point doesn't help the parents that are currently struggling. In Mississauga, the town that you represent, just last year, a group was stealing baby formula to trade for drugs. If that's not a sign that this is an out-of-control problem, I don't know what else is. So what specific things has your government done to bring down the cost of baby formula?
Madam Chair, a month from now, Madam Chair, Canadians will have access to the Canada Groceries and Essentials benefit. We recognize the rising cost that is happening, and this is going to provide an average
That does
family
nothing for the cost of baby formula. It's a Band-Aid that it will help families after the fact. The reality is I have been bringing up this issue about the rising cost of baby formula for years in Parliament. It's not like this is some surprise. You've answered questions that I've asked in question period on this. Has there been anything, one iota of an ounce of anything your government has done to bring down the specific cost of baby formula? Yes or no?
Madam Chair, again, through the Canada Groceries and Essentials that rebate that's going out to Canadians, this is going to help curb the costs. This is in addition to the fact that we're lowering costs at the pumps. We're also providing them with supports and
how will
affordable
this
childcare.
curb the cost of baby formula if you're providing families with a check after the fact? How does that actually lower the cost of baby formula on the shelf?
Madam Chair, with regards to supply chains, again, working with the Minister of Agriculture to make sure from a supply chain perspective we're doing everything we can to make sure to promote competition in this country.
There is no competition. The reality is...
Point of order. I just want to make sure the interpreters are able to do the interpretation.
Effectivement. Alors, je vous invite peut-être à...
Yes, that quite. I would invite you, therefore, not to overlap and speak one over the other because it's extremely difficult for the interpreters.
Clearly, the government has done nothing on baby formula, so I'm going to skip on to the next piece. Violence against women is extremely concerning. What specific actions has your government taken in the last 6 months to address the growing concern of women being killed by their intimate partners?
Madam Chair, thank you for that question. Again, through our significant historic investments through women and gender equality, we have addressed gender-based violence. We're working directly with provinces and territories. Through our government's commitment of $225 million, what this has done from the provinces and territories is it is allowed them to put forward $1.3 billion. In terms of direct impact, 46% of our actions were related to prevention. 1 million people across Canada were able to access services, whether that's counseling, housing, legal information, crisis supports, and community-based programs.
There's been a 76% increase in sexual assaults under the Liberal governments in the last decade. So I don't think spending tons of money on this has necessarily worked because all we see are more women dying, like we saw just yesterday in Gatineau. Like, this is a serious concern. What is the government doing today to make this better?
Again, as I've said earlier, not only is it important for us to have investments, which the sector has asked for, we're making sure that we're addressing prevention, which I've already answered as well.
All right,
we're also
so then
addressing this through legislation, which is important, like making femicide a first-degree
really
offense.
quickly, there are 231 calls to justice from the missing and murdered Indigenous women group. How many have been completed?
Madam Chair, I'm working very closely with the minister on this effort with regards to the murdered.
Do you
missing
know how
Indigenous-
many have been completed? Yes or no?
Madam Chair, we're doing everything we can. We recognize,
Two
given
have
that
been
it
completed.
was Red Dress Day earlier this week.
2 have been completed and 82 haven't even been started. This is a fail.
Madam Chair, it was Red Dress Day earlier this
Merci
week.
beaucoup, Madame la Ministre. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Minister. Very flexible in how we exchange our views, but I don't want overlap with the questioner and the answerer, because it's extremely difficult for the interpreters. So I hope that everybody will slow down and make it fine for everyone. Mr. Chen.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam.
This committee recently undertook a study regarding anti-feminist ideology, which highlighted how online influencers in the manosphere are pushing anti-feminist and misogynistic rhetoric onto particularly young men and boys. From there, dehumanizing women and girls becomes normalized, which in turn allows for acts of gender-based violence to take place. Through you, Madam Chair, Minister, what work are you undertaking to engage particularly young men and boys who are crucial in the solution?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for that question. Through Women and Gender Equality, we absolutely need to make sure we're engaging with men and boys. And the reality is that every single one of us has an important role to play to make sure we're doing everything we can to end gender-based violence in this country. Some of the work that we do includes funding projects that help engage with men and boys in a healthy way to make sure that we can address gender-based violence. And I recently returned back from Vancouver, where I met Black Buildup. We provided $669 million to this organization. Really proud to say that they teach young athletes through sport to make sure that they respect, that they provide consent, and ensure that they have bystander intervention to prevent gender-based violence. It's truly investments like these that help build a healthier culture where where respect is the norm, which is what we want, where harmful behaviors are challenged and prevented, where everyone understands their role in preventing gender-based violence. And I do want to take a moment and thank the work of Minister Michelle, who has recently launched a men and boys strategy on mental health. We recognize that this has been an ask. Men and boys need help, but they also need supports. And so to anyone that is listening to this committee, I urge you to go to the Minister of Health's website to put forward your recommendations to make sure that men and boys get the mental health support that they truly deserve.
Thank you, Minister. Speaking of investment, I know that constituents in my riding and Canadians indeed across the country want to understand how federal investments are being delivered, particularly when it comes to advancing gender equality and supporting those who face violence. Can you break down where the funding in last year's budget is going, including how investments are allocated across key areas such as gender-based violence prevention, housing support, economic empowerment programs, and community-based services?
I thank the member for that question. Absolutely. So what I was sharing earlier with the committee is that our investments to end gender-based violence through a national action plan to end gender-based violence, we put forth in our budget in 2022, $539 million that we've committed. We're 3 years into that plan. And through our investments already of $225 million, I was sharing earlier that $1.3 billion is what the provinces and territories have been able to put forward. It's incredible what this has done. We're talking about 27,400 prevention resources that have been accessed, whether that's counseling, housing, which the member was asking about, the legal information, crisis supports, which is vitally important. And I just want to share a positive story. The member is from Scarborough North. Just how much families in the member's writing really relies on these types of supports. Through Women's Program, we invested $280,000 into Homeward Family Shelter in Scarborough North to help strengthen its work and make sure that women and families can continue getting the support they need close to home. And that impact of that support is very real for women on the ground in Scarborough. It helps women facing crisis and instability, accessing housing, connecting with community-based supports, or helping getting navigation through the barriers that often stand in the way of the type of stability that women do need, whether that's income security, employment, childcare, the list goes on. So I give a shout out to the Homeward Family Shelter in Scarborough North for their good work.
Also known as Juliet's Place, is an incredible organization, and I thank you for sharing that important investment. Minister, you mentioned Red Dress Day, which was this past Tuesday, a day of awareness and action honoring missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. As you know, Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQI plus peoples continue to face disproportionately high rates of violence. This is part of the colonial realities that Canada continues to confront. Can you speak to the actions your government is taking to help end this violence?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for that question. Our heart again goes out to with Indigenous families, especially as they are grieving, and we want to make sure we're doing everything we can to help Indigenous women and girls.
Madam Minister, unfortunately, this is the end of the time that we have. We have to cut you off once again. Ms. Roberts, you have the floor. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm going to go back to the minister, a question that was asked earlier. The affordability crisis in this country has unfortunately caused a lot of individuals, especially seniors, that are having to go to shelters. So you talk about building homes quickly. Why is it then that the wait time for affordable housing is 8 to 10 years for anyone waiting? How quickly are you going to speak to that project to ensure seniors are not waiting that long and living on the streets?
Thank you for that question, Madam Chair. As I said earlier, how we're planning to address this is through our significant investments through housing. We've committed again $1 billion, and we're ensuring that through that $1 billion that
I don't mean to cut you off, and I apologize for that, but I have limited time, so I apologize, Madam Chair. I just wanted to know, what is the anticipated wait time? Is it going to go from 8 to 10 years to maybe 15 years, or are you going to be able to secure the fact that women, and especially seniors, have the opportunity to find housing this year?
Madam Chair, again, through our significant investments in housing, this is going to significantly help the challenges that we have with regards to homelessness. That includes senior women across the country. We're doing everything we can. We're working with provinces and territories to make sure that we can get those agreements settled so that we can get the funding out through the doors to make sure that we're building those shelters.
Thank you very much for that response. I don't think that that's what the seniors were looking for. I'm going to go back to the femicide in Quebec. So the 56-year-old man received a 9-year sentence, and after stabbing his wife, he will probably only serve 6 years. So one of the things that women are asking us, and that I've seen, especially when we did our tour across this country in 2024, from East Coast to the West Coast and back, is the fact that people are afraid to come out and speak to the police. People are afraid to come out and testify because they know that their perpetrators will get out on bail and their life could be on the line. Why is it that they are not serving the rightful sentence of 25 years for committing murder?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The member had a couple of questions, so I do want to be able to address each of them. The first part with regards to the gender-based violence and crime, Madam Chair, is through Bill C-16. Again, we are going to make sure that we're able to address that by making femicide a first-degree offense, making sure we're criminalizing coercive control, and through our bail reform, making sure that violent repeat offenders do not go back out on the streets. But on the other part of her question with regards to reporting, we recognize that there have been challenges with reporting gender-based violence, but thanks to our resources that we are providing, more women are coming forward to make sure that they can have their voice heard, and that has also helped, as you see, you're seeing an increase in reporting, but again, this is a way for us to make sure that we're tracking our progress and making good progress with regards to ending gender-based violence in this country.
Okay, so excuse me, again, I'm sorry, I have limited time. Madam Chair, through you, why then did this man who committed murder didn't get 25 years to life?
Again, Madam Chair, to make sure that we're addressing gender-based violence, we've put forward significant legislation. I do hope
Obviously, those significant violations aren't helping people because women are getting killed. 76% IPVs are happening today, yesterday. It's been almost 11 years that the Liberal government has been in place. And yet, we are seeing these numbers increase over and over and over again. Why is it that this gentleman, just a simple yes or no answer, do you agree that he should have had a 25-year sentence?
Again, we're doing everything we can to address gender.
It's a yes or no answer. Do you agree he should have? That's not the question I asked. I asked, do you agree he should have had a 25-year sentence? Yes or no?
Madam Chair, I don't think anyone in this committee will ever agree that we all want to make sure that gender-based violence ends in this country. I've already talked about legislation. I already talked about the important work that our government is doing to make sure that there are organizations on the ground to support them. I referred to our investments and crisis lines so that victims and survivors.
Those lines aren't working. Excuse me, Minister. Those lines aren't working. I just got off the phone with someone who's very upset, who's just been violated by her husband, and he's out on bail after 2 hours of being arrested. So you know what? For people listening at home, they're scared. They're worried. This man should have got a 25-year sentence. People should not be let out on bail after beating someone or killing someone. The 25-year sentence should be there for that gentleman.
Madame Roberts.
Thank you.
Ce sera tout le temps que nous avons. Merci.
Thank you very much, Ms. Roberts. Ms. Layton, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, through you to the Minister. Minister, through the main estimates, the Women's Program continues to provide important funding to community organizations across Canada, including in regions like Pickering and Brooklyn, where local groups are working to remove barriers and strengthen opportunities for women and families. Can you share how these investments are empowering organizations in Pickering, Brooklyn, and helping deliver measurable outcomes for women and gender diverse people, please?
100%. Thank you so much, Madam Chair, for that question. Again, through our significant investments, I've addressed gender-based violence quite a lot in this committee, but to the member's question, we're really empowering women. We're giving them the opportunities through our women's program and helping the organizations on the ground make sure that they are in every respect getting opportunities to see themselves in leadership positions. In fact, from a pay equity legislation, our government put forward that legislation to make sure that women can also get paid equally for the work that they're doing. Again, through our women entrepreneurship strategy, I cannot tell you and stress enough in this committee how much of an impact this has made as a former entrepreneur myself. We've already supported over 500,000 women across the country. And good news, our SME growth since we kicked off the strategy has increased from 17.8% back in 2023 to 20.9% just last year alone. This is significant. And again, it's amazing the impact we're seeing. Investments are needed. We're going to make sure that the investments are going into the right place. And we certainly need to continue to empower women in every which way we can.
Thank you. In February, in the riding again, Pickering, Brooklyn, we hosted the inaugural Black Entrepreneurs Forum, bringing together Black business owners and community members for a very important conversation about opportunities, barriers, and the road ahead. Minister Valdez, thank you again for joining as a panelist, and your presence meant a great deal to the community. So at the forum, 3 themes came through clearly: the challenges of finding the right information on available funding and programs, the power of mentorship and community collaboration in building a stronger entrepreneurship ecosystem, and the importance of investing in Black youth as the next generation of business leaders. With programs like the Business Benefit Finder, the Can Export SMEs, which offers eligible business up to $50,000 to expand into international markets already in place, can you speak to how the National Black Entrepreneurship Strategy is translating these themes into concrete outcomes, and what more can be done to ensure Black entrepreneurs in the community like ours have equitable access to the full suite of support available to them?
Thank you, Chair, for that question. I really want to thank the member for hosting an incredible Black History Month event in her riding. I got an opportunity to meet the incredible entrepreneurs from that region. And again, what I can share through our Black Entrepreneurship Program is we have supported well over 24,000 Black entrepreneurs across the country. And through our Black Entrepreneurship Loan Fund, we've approved more than $70 million in financing to over 800 loans to date. This has made a significant impact because we recognize Black entrepreneurs do have challenges and barriers with accessing that type of support. And I know the member does not know this, but I have good news. Since that event, Stagecoach and Ajax and Pickering Performing Arts for Kids were able to expand or are planning to expand into the Durham region in 2027. So I just wanted to share a good news story as a result of the event that she hosted in her region. But again, our government will do everything we can to continue to create an inclusive economy, an inclusive environment where every Canadian can become an entrepreneur. Through our Women Entrepreneurship Strategy, which I talked about, through our Black Entrepreneurship Strategy, through the 2S LGBTQI+ Entrepreneurship Strategy, this will certainly help again. As we build the strongest economy in the G7, we want to make sure that we have full and equal participation of all Canadians.
Thank you, Minister Valdez, for your answer. We'll move on.
30 seconds, Madame.
30 seconds. Have you finished?
Seconds, if I could ask the minister maybe to talk a little bit about some of the community-based programs that are reducing isolation for senior women. And we're talking a lot about the seniors and what measures are in place to protect the financial vulnerability of the seniors.
Yes, absolutely. Maybe I'll just cite a perfect example. Out in Edmonton, we have the Edmonton Aboriginal
Ce sera
Senior
pour un
Center.
autre tantôt pour l'exemple. Je suis désolée. Le temps est terminé. Madame
Madam
Larouche.
Chair,
Oh,
I was having so much fun.
Que voulez-vous? C'est la vie en
Yes.
comité. Madame Larouche, 2 minutes et demie, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. For this turn, I'd like to get back to some measures that were announced in the budget. Let's discuss the media. In the study on anti-feminist ideology, we suggested increasing support to local media and community media. In Quebec, we have a good model of community media in order to counter hate speech. I'd like you to speak to the concrete investments your government can make for media that play a key role in the prevention of radicalization and eventually the prevention of femicide.
Although this is within the Minister of Heritage's portfolio, what I can share is that our government remains committed to make sure that we can support media in every which way. That includes journalists, making sure that we can tell the real stories, even out in Quebec. And with regards to hate speech, again, we've put forward legislation here in Parliament, Bill C-9, that addresses anti-hate. And Madam Chair, we're going to do everything we can to promote local media, giving opportunities for the storytellers to share the good work. And we are investing significantly into arts, into culture, into heritage, to make sure that we can preserve Canadian culture, and that includes Francophone and Quebec culture as well.
Oui, je vous en parle et parlez-en à votre collègue parce que...
Please talk about this to your colleagues, because in order to work on the rise of this radicalization, well, local media is key, and I wanted to make sure I got that message across. Another measure in the economic update was a fund to help businesses. However, it's a loan. It's not direct help. Whereas for smaller SMEs that won't be able to go further into debt, having access to that, well, it's often women that own these smaller SMEs. What are you going to do? Will you support the BQ's wage subsidy in order to help women entrepreneurs quickly? You don't even have 5 or 10 seconds. I'm so sorry. The time is up. Madam Minister, thank you very much. You answered our questions. Thank you very much for that, and I wish you an excellent evening. We will suspend for a few moments. Oh, it's over? Oh, okay. That's what I'm saying, yes. Oh, wow. Oh, yes. If you want to stay, we'll keep you, certainly. But in any case, I won't make any presumptions. Thank you very much. And we'll retain your colleagues for a few moments. We have the pleasure to speak to Gail Mitchell, Miss McGray, and Mr. Massey. And so after speaking with the minister, starting with Madam Goodridge, over to you for 5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Today, it'll probably come as no surprise that I'm going to ask you guys now about baby formula, and this is something that is critically important. And do you guys have any answers, through the chair, as to why baby formula has risen twice as fast in Canada as it has in the States?
Thank you very much for that question. You'll likely understand, Madam Chair, that our remit at Women and Gender Equality Canada is not specifically dealing with prices of baby formula. But my colleague, Etienne René, may have some information around the general economy that he could share.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. What I can say is that we have seen increases in grocery prices on a range of goods, and that is due to supply chains, global economic sort of disruptions, and just general inflation through the economy. But I do not have immediate data on baby formula, although I am aware of the cost increases.
And my understanding, Mr. Massey, is you're with Industry Canada, correct? Department of Industry?
That is correct. I'm with Innovation, Science, and Economic
All right.
Development.
How many baby formula facilities exist in Canada?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair, but I am not, I don't have necessarily information on the production facilities across the country.
There's one. It's located in Kingston, and we haven't been able to discover through order paper questions and a variety of different information whether they even have availability in Canada. In fact, you can order it online, but it's not available on any grocery store shelf. That seems like a problem, that we are solely reliant on exports for a product that is critical to families that rely on it to feed their child. Switching gears a little bit, back to intimate partner violence. What specific items has the government done to address the epidemic that is existing of women being killed by their intimate partners?
Madam Chair, thank you for the question. Intimate partner violence is certainly a critical problem in this country, and the member would be right that this is of significant concern to the government, as the Minister would have stated. In terms of what is being done about it, I can speak broadly to the Government of Canada's overall work on gender-based violence. We have a federal strategy on gender-based violence, which is actually brings in public safety, RCMP, Public Health Agency of Canada, among others. We have some very good information on our website about very specifically what the various organizations do in that area. As far as women and gender equality is concerned, as the Minister indicated, the premise of our programming is that those who are living with the situation on a daily basis are the best ones to develop the solutions. And so we do project work with a number of organizations who play in this space.
All right. So does it concern you that women are being killed at a much higher rate than men?
Absolutely. The numbers are very clear on intimate partner violence. And as the Minister was referring to the Minister of Justice bills, this is the most critical piece that the government is advancing at this time.
So the cost of living crisis that we're currently facing is making it harder for women to leave abusive situations. We know that one of the big struggles that women cite as to why they stay in abusive relationships and in abusive homes is because they can't afford to leave. When the cost of living gets as high as it is, where people are trying to figure out which bill they're going to pay this month and which bill they're going to skip paying this month, that makes leaving that much more difficult, especially when they have nowhere to go. And we see so many shelters that are so full beyond the capacity they can't even get in. Mm-hmm. What specific pieces is the government doing to address the fact that the shelters right across the country are full and women are being forced to stay in abusive relationships because of the cost of living crisis the government's caused?
Je suis vraiment désolée, chère madame, c'est tout le temps que nous...
I'm so sorry. That is the end of your allotted time. Mr. Toomba, we're going to continue with you. We're going to check your connection, and we'll see if your connection is approved. 5 minutes. Interpretation will resume when the sound quality improves.
Fonctionne très bien.
Merci beaucoup. Alors, ma question sera pour M. Massy. Dans les régions rurales, les femmes sont souvent moins
Interpretation will resume when the sound quality improves.
aux formations et au marché. Comment votre ministère pourrait-il adapter leur programme pour aider les femmes noires?
Merci, monsieur. Je suis désolée, on va devoir vous...
I'm so sorry. And now, Madam Nathan.
Prenez le relais.
Yeah, okay, go ahead. Go. It's G.
Madame Wyan.
Madam Wyan.
Thank you very much to the officials for joining us today. As a former recipient of funding supports from WAGE, I'm actually going to ask a nerd question about how the department takes a view on program design and how you set out metrics to measure and evaluate the impact of WAGE programming.
Thank you very much for the question, Madam Chair. We have significant engagement with our project partners, which is one of the key ways that we design in a way that is going to meet the needs on the ground. That feedback is coming in all the time. We have a significant portfolio of projects. The women's program alone has been around a very, very long time, since 1973. And just since 2018, we've got over 800 projects. So we have a significant volume of projects from which we get feedback. And so when we design the work ahead, we certainly work with our stakeholders to make sure that we're going to address the needs. In terms of building in impacts and results, this is something, as you may have noticed in our departmental plan, we're going to be spending quite a lot more time on thinking about how we speak about those impacts, not just for the sake of the funds, the public funds that are being spent, but also because it's important that Canadians understand that the work that is happening at critical levels with civil society organizations on the ground, who really are the driver of progress.
I know a number of years ago, the federal government started to introduce gender-based analysis as a tool and a framework for all government departments. I was wondering if you could speak to the role that you play in terms of capacity building and supporting other government departments to make sure that we are doing that work very rigorously.
Thank you very much for the question. You're quite right. GBA Plus has been around for more than 30 years. And it is a significant discipline. Canada is a world leader in this space. And I would note that in the Spring Economic Statement, there are even snapshots of various pieces of analysis around various investments. We know that we have a standing committee on public accounts that issued a February 2026 report, so we are preparing a response for that shortly. I would say what we're seeing in government in terms of ability to apply GBA Plus is promising. We have just got the results in from our 7th capacity survey in 2025. We've streamlined the questions to make it easier, and in fact, we have a response rate that is 10% up from last year. So it's now 83% instead of 73%. And so we are seeing more evidence that GBA Plus is being addressed at the problem definition stage, in addition to the stage of options and decisions. So we're very encouraged by the fact that we're seeing it much earlier in the process. I would be remiss if I did not mention that this is Gender Equality Week. So we spend a lot of time during this week working with our colleagues to raise awareness. Oh, sorry, GBA Awareness Week, rather, not Gender Equality Week. And so this week is an important week for that purpose.
I ask if there's any gold stars that you would give to any departments who are doing this? Or would you like to shout them all out?
Well, I guess I would say, we try to make sure that the work we do with departments is comparing them to their own state. So essentially helping them come up the maturity curve. And not all organizations have the same level of maturity. Some have been doing it, in different ways for a very long time. I would say that we are seeing some evidence that I actually would shout out my central agency colleagues. And the Department of Finance has developed significant rigor around this area, and so has Treasury Board Secretariat. And that is enabled by the Gender Budgeting Act that was passed in 2018.
And that's your time. Madam Roberts, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. I want to go to a question that Mr. Massey referred to earlier. Sorry, Madam Chair, is it my turn? Hello?
Excusez-moi, on fait une vérification, c'est ce que j'avais sur ma...
Oh, excuse me? Yes, Madam Roberts.
It is my turn.
Il y a beaucoup de choses là, qui arrivent. Là,
Sorry, lots of things happening, but yes, it's your time.
Okay, thank you very much. So I want to go back to a question that my colleague, that you referred to my colleague earlier about the inflationary crisis. So my question to you is, the wait time in my area of King Vaughan for affordable housing due to this inflationary situation that we're currently faced with is 8 to 10 years. Do you see any advances in speeding up that process so that our senior women and women that are looking for homes and apartments will be available sooner than that period of time?
Madam Chair, if I could just make an attempt at answering that question. I hope you will understand that neither industry, innovation, science, and economic development, nor women and gender equality have significant insight into the specifics of wait times for affordable housing. And I'm afraid those questions would be best directed to our colleagues at Housing Infrastructure and Communities Canada.
Okay, so I'll move on then. So, on May 1st, 2023, we had a witness by the name of Ms. Tamia Nagy. She shared her concern with us. And my question to her was, why are judges not applying the maximum sentences to these perpetrators, referring to the human traffic perpetrators? She was a victim, actually a survivor of human trafficking. And this was the response from the judges. The judges who have decided not to go for the harsh sentence have said that these would be too harsh. Then I don't understand why we have laws. Why do we have laws if the judges are not implementing our laws? I did in 2020, I was fortunate to do a tour from coast to coast with the Status of Women Committee to listen to survivors, to listen to individuals. We met with shelters to find out that this government has not provided them the tools that they need to survive. Do you feel that the laws that are facing our human traffickers, these perpetrators, who sometimes don't even get a day in jail, should be increased?
Madam Chair, as the Minister was noting earlier when she was here, Bill C-16 is being led by Justice Canada, and the notion of addressing how the justice system deals with perpetrators of gender-based violence, intimate partner violence, human trafficking, those kinds of things is actually contemplated in the bill. I do know that I can say that federal, provincial, territorial relationships are quite strong in this area. I actually made a presentation to the federal, provincial, territorial ministers of justice not long ago, just on the gender-based violence national action plan, because there is a correlation between these things, and the pieces have to function together. And I would just maybe last point is there is a pillar on the gender-based violence national action plan, which is about a supportive justice system, and we are seeing additional action in that area, partly due to the Justice Canada bill.
Well, I will tell you that I have met with many parents and many survivors, and the sad news is, the reality is, Mrs. McRae, is that they're going after our children and they're grooming them at a very young age, and that is disheartening to me. I will tell you from speaking to Carol Wildgoose, I spoke to Jasmine Defina, I've spoken to Cassandra Diamond. These are women that have helped and tried to help provide shelter for these survivors, and to no fault of their own, the funds are not there. And these individuals, these women, are being left on the street to be re-victimized again and again and again. So I ask again, how is it after 11 years of this Liberal government that we don't understand? If I could just give you the stats, Nova Scotia, #1 province for human trafficking, second worst province, Ontario, and then PEI, New Brunswick, Saskatchewan. The worst city in the country is Thunder Bay. We are not supporting our survivors of human trafficking.
Merci
What do you say to that?
chers collègues. Merci, Madame Roberts. C'est tout le temps que nous avions.
Thank you, dear colleagues. Thank you to our colleagues. That's all the time we have. What was a bit more confusing, what was confusing earlier is that we didn't start a new round, we just continued our round. And now, Mr. Chen, over to you.
Reforms, survivors often tell us what matters most in the immediate aftermath of violence is whether they can access timely, practical support close to home. Can you speak to what WAGE is doing to strengthen survivor services and improve access to supports for women and children who are fleeing violence?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Clearly, those fleeing violence need safe places to be, and they need access to supports. And I think we all have seen that demonstrated time and time again. I think, we play a part in that ecosystem at Women and Gender Equality, certainly. We do not directly fund shelters or housing, but we do work with organizations that do quite a lot of work in this area. I will point to the Gender-Based Violence National Action Plan because there are certainly supports that are provided by provinces and territories through that National Action Plan that is partly funded by the federal government to very specific housing supports and shelters. So, for us, it's really about working with those on the ground, again, who know exactly what needs to happen, and being able to ensure that, for example, that workers in shelters are trained, have trauma-informed training, that some of those shelters as well work very closely with police forces to make sure that there's less traumatization involved in questioning. There are even places where, pets are allowed to be. So there's a significant amount of work that goes into best practices around the best supports for victims and survivors.
Thank you very much. Indigenous, racialized, and immigrant women face compounded and intersectional challenges when leaving an abusive relationship. And these may relate to systemic and cultural barriers, or could even be related to immigration status, creating vulnerability that can be further exploited by abusers. How is your department working to recognize this particular challenge and ensuring that supports are available across the country to women who are facing these compounded and intersectional obstacles?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Women and Gender Equality, being the lead on gender-based analysis, in addition to our work for supporting communities, particularly women and gender diverse people, we build in intersectionality into all the work that we do. And so I'm I would say that we pay particular attention in the calls for proposals that we do and in the proposals that we review to ensure that we cover off specific communities. I will, perhaps give an example around women with disabilities. So in 2024-25, we launched a Equality for Senior Women and Women and Girls with Disabilities investment call, because we know those communities are particularly affected. And so about $2.2 million was invested in projects that would really serve women primarily and girls primarily with disabilities as a beginning. So what we do is we look through our data and evidence, and we can see through intersectional data that we have key gaps in certain areas, and that's then how we determine the way ahead.
In terms of women who are newcomers who have experienced language barriers, cultural dissonance, unfamiliarity with the system, who may also be fearful due to immigration status. Do you have examples of funding or investments that have been made to support that demographic?
Thank you very much for the question. We do know that a significant amount of gender-based violence is rooted in culture. And so
Merci,
Canada being a
Madame
very
McCreary.
diverse
C'est tout
country.
le temps que nous avions pour cet échange. Madame Larouche, pour 2 minutes et demie.
Thank you. That's all your time. Madame Larouche for 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much to the civil servants joining us today. I will try to really understand what's happening within your department with all of these issues: violence against women, femicide, and the rise of anti-feminism, meninism. With all of that, under the 2026-27 department plan in the CRE, the Government of Canada set out in the 2025 budget, we heard about the cuts that departments were asked to make. With everything your department does to help people, you're planning to cut $8 million a year in 2026, 2027, 2027-28, and 28-29. And you want to save money with concerned stakeholders. Can you tell the measures you've set out to save $8 million a year, set out in the CRE? Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. 2 things. You are absolutely correct. Regarding, there is an echo, and interpretation will resume when the echo is gone.
Bien. Alors,
Very well. Very well. We're taking the computer out of the room. Please continue. Our department has about 400 employees. You will understand that the issues and the questions of women's rights, which represents 51% of the population, women that is, that doesn't just fall under our remit. So we have a lot of work to do, and we play a support role. And we also help with projects that help people on the ground. Now, regarding cuts, the $8 million cuts that you referred to, I do not have an answer for you. I can't tell you exactly how that $8 million will be saved. Thank you very much. Madame Goodridge, over to you.
Thank you, Madame. So I have a question. How much money does your department spend when it comes to the calls to action for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and 2S LGBTQI plus people is a subject that we have worked on quite a lot with the lead department, which is, as you would know, Crown and Indigenous Relations Canada. In 2021, Women and Gender Equality received $55 million over 5 years, and that money is doing its work. We have over 100 First Nations, Inuit, and Métis organizations in all provinces and territories that we're working with. Since 2018, we've funded 134 organizations. That's $89 million, then that includes the $55 million. It is very important to us as well to make sure that we have Indigenous-led approaches, and I would point to Pillar 4 in the National Action Plan, which is very specifically about Indigenous women leading those approaches.
But how much is spent every year by the department? Not a global amount over X number of years. There has to be, this is how much is being spent for this calendar year.
What I can tell you is that in 2024-25, investments in those approaches allowed about 186,000 people to access culturally appropriate resources.
Do you know how much money was spent or was allocated in your department in last budget year?
So in 25-26, you're saying?
Sure.
Yeah. So what I would say is that we do not have a specific envelope anymore for, for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. We actually...
there was a massive inquiry that came up with 231 calls to justice.
Yeah.
2 of those calls to justice have been completed. 82 haven't been completed. And the Department for Women and Gender Equality does not have a budget pocket for completing these calls to justice anymore? They used to, but they don't anymore? Is that correct?
Madam Chair, we have significant investments that are already in place. And so those investments have been made and they're continuing to do their work. And we as a department, we always have a significant amount of funding that goes to Indigenous women overall.
I appreciate that, but we're here to talk about estimates.
Of reasons.
And a significant amount is not a dollar figure. I could possibly forgive a minister for not having a specific dollar figure. You're the deputy minister. You don't have a dollar figure. That is concerning.
So, Madam Chair, there is a specific action plan with specific funds for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. We, as a department, invest significantly more than that in the support of Indigenous women and girls. So we can get you, I certainly can come back and give you a list of the projects that we have funded that would support missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in a global sense, absolutely.
Thank you. And then how many of the outstanding calls to action is the department currently working on?
Madam Chair, Women and Gender Equality is responsible for part of the work on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. We have very specific work that we've done, as I mentioned, on supporting commemorations. So significant money went into that, so $13 million.
Okay, I didn't ask how much money this time. I actually asked how many of the calls to action are currently being worked on. And if you don't have that answer, perhaps you could table that with our committee. But this is something that a lot of Indigenous communities, like this week we celebrated Red Dress Day, were Red Dress walks. This is something that is real. There are missing and murdered Indigenous women from my riding. There are families. There are the survivors. They want to know that there is action being taken, and saying there's significant money, but you can't say how much. That is meaningless.
So, Madam Chair, the work that we do is not specific only to 1 or 2 actions. The work that we do supports calls to action 1.3, 1.5, 1.6, 16.44, and 17.2. So,
merci beaucoup, Madame McCray. Alors, Monsieur Toumba, la parole est à vous.
Thank you, Ms. McCray. Mr. Tomba, you have the floor. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Welcome to our witnesses. How are you? I hope that you are all well. because sometimes our exchange here is quite intense. I have a question for each of you in turn. Women often have less access to business and to access to markets. What are you doing to help women, and in particular Black women, and those in rural areas have the same opportunities as women elsewhere in the country?
Alors, merci, Madame.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for the question. It's a pleasure for me to answer it. I can speak to that. The government renewed in 2024 a funding for Black entrepreneurs. There is work that is being done. It is based on 3 pillars: loans programs that are available for Black entrepreneurs through the African Canadian Federation for the Economy. And we also, more specifically, have in the system support services for the entrepreneurs, mentoring, coaching, and so on. And with the regional development agencies, we have organizations that work within an urban area and also within rural areas, and also on 2 opposing geographical areas. So you can have the access to the Women's Female Entrepreneur Program. There is movement and work being done in Northern Ontario, and also the Alberta Women's Association that operates throughout the province of Alberta and which offers help to female entrepreneurs in that area. In 2020, I initiated, during the pandemic, help for single parent families. I know that there are questions that have been raised about the figures, but it is difficult to have specific figures on the results of programs. I find that rather normal. But can you give us some data that would reflect the success of these entrepreneurial programs for Black women in rural areas? How do you take your decisions? Thank you so much, Madam Chair, for the question. I have with me today data for the overall ecosystem. For example, for female entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, 2,300 loans. We have more than 200,000 female entrepreneurs, and in rural areas we have some 75,000, and we have some 24,000 women entrepreneurs in rural areas. In terms of the demographics, if you are asking about or Black women or other demographics, I could provide them, but I could say also that one of the things that we don't want to do is to stigmatize the people who come to the program. So we can voluntarily ask them to supply demographic information, but it is not mandatory. I can check into it if you like, and I would be very happy to send that information to the committee. Thank you so much. I know I've only got 30 seconds left. Yes, I saw that. I just want to hear a comment about what concretely does that bring to the economy in terms of support. Thank you very much for the question, through you, Madam Chair. Gender equality involves three aspects of female participation: economic, social, and leadership. And also, I'm sorry, this is all the time that you have. I'm sorry that your time is up. Ms. Roberts, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you again to the witnesses for being here. I have a question. Maybe I'll leave it to any one of you to answer. How is the department conducting any recent analysis on how inflation and housing costs are disproportionately impacting women fleeing violence?
Thank you very much for the question, Madam Chair. I would say that at Women and Gender Equality, we have significant research efforts with Statistics Canada to be able to understand how we can fill data gaps around those most affected by things like poverty, joblessness, homelessness, a number of areas. A significant amount of our resources, in fact, go to Statistics Canada for these purposes. You will know that Statistics Canada has a very significant investment in disaggregated data, so understanding how various groups of women and Canadians are affected by a whole range of social issues is part of that work.
Do we have sorry to interrupt, Mrs. McRae, but do we have can you establish a specific number for us? Like, are we improving? Are we declining? Because I'm not hearing that there is a lot of opportunities for women that are trying to, escape this violence, that there's any place for them to live. When I speak to individuals that are running shelters, the stay in shelters is becoming longer and longer because there is no affordable housing. So maybe we could table that, but I guess it's something that I'm concerned about that I've heard. My next question is, many women in Canada continue to face disproportionate economic pressures relating to housing, caregiving, responsibilities, inflation. They're forgotten. I know that we had an individual, James Jenner, as a witness a few weeks ago, and he mentioned that a lot of the times caregivers are not rewarded for the time that they have to leave their job to take care of the elderly. Is there anything that your department knows on how many opportunities or what is the number of caregivers that are having to leave their job to take care of the elderly?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. The information that I could give you would really be through Statistics Canada. They have done quite a lot of research on informal care and how it affects various groups of Canadians. And certainly we know it affects women much more than men. We still have women giving disproportionate amounts of childcare and elder care despite full-time jobs. And so there is a significant cultural change as well that we need to be looking at around gender norms.
Thank you. So recently we had Emily Brown as a witness, and one of the things that she's advocating for is tax fairness for single women. One of the data that she shared with us was a couple earning $50,000 will pay $1,172 in taxes. However, a single senior will pay close to $5,800 in taxes. But really, when you look at the overall expenses of the individuals, the rent is the same, the utilities are the same, the gas is the same, the insurance on their car is the same. How is that fair for an individual versus a couple? Has your department done anything to look at the tax fairness for single women?
Thank you very much for the question, Madam Chair. As you would appreciate, tax matters are the domain of the Department of Finance exclusively, and I would be directing that question to colleagues at the Department of Finance in particular.
So we have, I've been working with, I've been going to different food banks, and the increased number of seniors that they're seeing is pretty scary. What is it that we're doing to help as a lot of single seniors are women? What are we doing because of the inflationary situation that we are faced with? How are we assisting these women that are living below the poverty line and not being able to make ends meet?
And I will very much agree with the comments that you're making around senior women in poverty.
Merci. Je passe maintenant
Thank you. Thank you. We very much appreciate what you said. Madame Gladieux. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
The department officials for being with us today. I have a couple quick questions, and then I'm going to share my time with Mr. Chen. So we see that tariffs are impacting small businesses incredibly, and I wondered if you have any information about whether that's worse for women-led businesses.
Thank you very much for the question, Madam Chair. I would say some characteristics of women-led businesses that we know about, and I know Mr. Massey can give you those, would tell us that women tend to have smaller companies. They tend to be much more in the service areas. They're often about self-employment in many cases. We don't have as many women in export situations. And then I'm going to turn to my colleague, Etienne René Massy, to give a little bit more.
Thank you for the question. So in complement to the deputy's question, it is true that women entrepreneur businesses are often self-employed businesses. About 37% of Canadian self-employed are women entrepreneurs. And because of their size and often because of other responsibilities, they do sometimes, when there are periods of economic shock, suffer greater consequences on that. The government is conscious of that and has, through the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy and, of course, through the Business Development Bank, sort of a range of measures for women entrepreneurs.
That's good. Next question is about, there's $52 million announced for victim services support. Can you tell us a little bit about the types of organizations that will support?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My understanding is that those funds were announced by Minister of Justice. And I would say I'm not as familiar with the details of that programming as I would be with women and gender equality programming. But I think one thing I will say is that we do see a need for continued supports and additional supports for victim services. And so we're very pleased to see that investment happen.
Mr. Chen.
Madam Chair, at a time when there are setbacks in human rights protections in some places and many gender diverse women are reporting feeling less safe, Pride season starts next month with members of the 2S LGBTQI+ community raising concerns regarding their safety at Pride festivals. Statistics Canada reported in 2023, hate crimes targeting sexual orientation increased 69% from the previous year. This is alarming. What action is WAGE taking to better protect 2S LGBTQ+I+ communities across the country?
Thank you very much for this question, Madam Chair. I want to reiterate what the member has been saying about increased hate. We have significant work underway with the Department of Canadian Heritage on the Canadian Anti-Hate Strategy, which provides over $12 million over 5 years to our department. And out of that total, there's $3 million. Sorry, in addition to that, there's $3 million over 2 years for Pride security. That now has been made permanent with Budget 2025. And so we will have $1.5 million annually for Pride security. I want to just mention that we have worked with Fierté Canada, Canada Pride, on these projects. They have put significant investment not only in large Pride parades, but in fact small ones. 84% of the funds that they use to support Pride events are actually from smaller rural and remote communities. And those have made the difference between those events happening or not happening because members do need to feel safe in attending.
C'est parfait? Okay. Well, that brings our meeting to an end. I'm so sorry. I was forgetting you. I apologize, Madame Laroche. 2.5 precious minutes for you. Precious indeed. To come back to this issue of the budgets, with all the questions that my colleagues have put, I do have the last word. I know that the 2025-26 and also the total funding will go from $414 to $206 million. Can you explain how the main estimates of 24-26 will show this difference in funding, and what does that represent? Thank you so much for your question. First of all, I would like to come back to this point. In the 2025-26 budget, funding it was protected for this department. It was protected because we asked for a 2% reduction in this area, but with a greater reduction in other areas. And as the minister has said, the funding that was given is without end. It's permanent funding. This is the first time. It's quite extraordinary, as has been said. The stability in funding is one of the greatest challenges for the whole sector. Now, with respect to the figures that were presented in the House, it's the case, as always, that there will be decisions to be taken in the future which may not align with the figures. The figures represent decisions taken to date. And the majority of needs awaiting decisions would be at the end of March 2027, involving the national plan for gender-based violence, which would need funding. Thank you so much, Madame Laroche, and thank you to our witnesses who made themselves available today. I appreciate it very much. I know it can be frustrating, but I'm the timekeeper here. So thank you for being here, for appearing, and I hope to see you again. We do have a few items to deal with here in committee. The 2026-2027 estimates. So let's begin. Should vote 1 under the Department for Women and Gender Equality be adopted on division? Thank you. Shall a vote 5 under the Department of Women and Gender Equality pass, be adopted on division? And also, would you like the chair to report our main estimate to the House? Agreed. Agreed. Maybe a few reminders. There'll be the main estimates that we have just voted on will be probably deposited at the same time as another document. There is something that the officials brought in. No, what? The analysts? Oh, here it is. The analysts have prepared the press release. Would you want to leave this in the hands of our very able analysts and the chair, or do you want to look at it? You're satisfied? Okay. The deadlines for the study on menopause is the May 21st, a Thursday, and then we will begin our next study on June 9. And when we come back on the 26th, there will be 1 hour set aside for women's shelters. This is a new study that we will be beginning, and there'll be an hour on version 2 of the anti-feminism report. 2 hours. So for women's shelters. So we'll be busy to the end. Ladies and gentlemen, I will see you again in 2 weeks. Have a very nice evening.